Earlier this week, a viewer commented that I should spend more time talking about high-end Burgundy. And you know what? He's absolutely right. Burgundy is an area where collectors can spend the most money and also make the biggest mistakes, particularly mistakes that have a devastating impact on your wine budget. Burgundy is an area where sweeping generalizations and assumptions can be particularly problematic. To be sure, some vineyards are so consistent that you can buy with confidence pretty much every single vintage. In contrast, others are so fragmented that reliance on the label or classification is not enough, even for Grand Cru Burgundy. So in this video, I'm going to discuss when terroir is dispositive, when the producer matters more, and how vintage can change the calculus. When people ask me whether terroir always prevails in Burgundy, my answer is always, it depends. Certainly when you're talking about tightly controlled, small vineyards, such as Romanée-Conti or La Tâche, you can't go wrong. These are arguably two of the very best vineyards in the entire world. The conditions are so perfect, it's almost impossible to make a wine that is anything other than world-class. La Romanée is similar. This is the smallest Grand Cru in Burgundy, and it's another monopole, so you're guaranteed to have consistently outstanding wines from this site year after year. Musigny and Chambertin are not far behind. These are not monopoles, so you will have some producer variation, but these sites are controlled by a small number of serious producers, so you don't have to worry about quality or producer variation negatively impacting or detracting from the extremely strong sites. Certainly when it comes to the sites that I've mentioned to this point in the video, terroir is absolutely the most important factor. In fact, these sites are so strong that they virtually eliminate winemaking risk from the equation. For example, Domaine Leroy does not even have an enologist. Imagine that for a second. One of the top producers in the world does not even bother having an enologist. Ms. Leroy said that this is because there's really not any decisions to be made when it comes to the production of Domaine Leroy wines. Unlike Bordeaux, there's no blending decisions to be made. You either have a red grape Pinot Noir or a white grape Chardonnay. Plus, all the vineyard sites are classified, so you simply harvest all the fruit that meets your standards in each vineyard and then make wine with it. Even here, however, nothing is absolute. Clos-d'Atar is Burgundy's largest monopole at around 7.5 hectares. This is an amazing site that has a compelling history that dates back for many centuries. Strictly applying the terroir always wins logic, Clos-d'Atar should be as close to a sure thing as you can get. And yet, I've had some experiences with this wine that did not quite meet my expectations. For example, I had the 2011 vintage a while back, and while it was certainly enjoyable, it did not come close to rivaling the quality of the wines that I've discussed earlier in this video, and I was a bit disappointed relative to my expectations and also the price point. So far, things have been pretty straightforward, but they can get far more tricky when you're talking about even a Grand Cru site that can be very large, with substantial variations in conditions from parcel to parcel, and also with a much larger number of producers involved. This is where the producer takes on extreme significance, and there's no better example than Corton. And here we're talking about the red version. To say Corton is fragmented would be an understatement. It's a whopping 160 hectares, which is more than 3 times the size of the next largest Grand Cru. It spans 3 different villages, has 28 named Climats, and has more than 150 different owners. In addition, you could have substantial differences from parcel to parcel due to variations in sun exposure caused by the surrounding hillside. So you could have 2 different bottles of Corton Grand Cru, but these wines could be completely different because the fruit comes from different villages, different sun exposures, different soils, and different producers. Clos de Vougeot is another classic case. This is the 2nd largest Grand Cru in Burgundy, and it's around 50 hectares in size. There's 80 different owners and 100 different parcels. So you could have a wine from Clos de Vougeot that ranges from transcendent to barely village level in terms of quality. A Chazot can be highly variable as well, albeit on a smaller scale. Achoso is around 37 hectares in size, but there's dozens of parcels and producers. Huge variations in exposure, elevation, and production quality could make two different bottlings of Achoso taste like they come from completely different vineyards. Up to this point, everything is fairly intuitive. The best sites produce the best wines, and the more fragmented the vineyard, even for a Grand Cru site, the more that producer matters. But there's also situations where a vineyard that was previously lacking in prestige and not known for high quality can be elevated by the strength of a single winemaker and result in a wine that defies its classification. And so it is with Henri Jayer. Certainly Jayer had some Grand Cru parcels, but he's perhaps best known for taking on an abandoned vineyard that had not been used after phylloxera. This was a site that was actually used to make Jerusalem artichokes during World War II. But Jayer saw potential and reclaimed this site by hand. He even blasted the limestone with dynamite so that he could plant a vineyard. And in 1978, he released his first single vineyard bottling of Creux Parentu. While Creux Parentu is a Premier Cru site, thanks to Jayer's talents and efforts, the wines that are produced from that site today certainly exceed the quality of many sites that are actually classified as Grand Crus. My new book, Napa Valley Decoded, is already a #1 bestseller and the top new release in wine. This is the book that I wish I had when I first got into Napa Valley many years ago. This book has quickly become a trusted resource for collectors, enthusiasts, and wine professionals. Whether you drink Napa Valley wines, are studying for a certification exam, or are visiting Napa Valley, this book will be an invaluable resource. To learn more, please be sure to check out the link in the description below. Vintage is certainly another variable that complicates the equation, but I think the impact varies by producer and by site. Let's start with some of the strongest sites. When you take La Tâche, for example, certainly a strong vintage of La Tâche, such as 1990, will be better than a La Tâche from a more challenging vintage. But the vineyard is so strong that even in so-called off vintages, it can produce a world-class wine. It has incredibly favorable aspect and sun exposure that helps the grapes to get ripened in pretty much every vintage. The drainage is also extremely favorable and helps the vineyard to withstand even heavy rains, and the farming is absolutely meticulous. So even in a so-called off vintage, you could very well have a situation where La Tâche produces not just a world-class wine, but a wine that is actually capable of exceeding the quality of a Burgundy from even a highly regarded producer from a strong vintage. Strong vintages elevate everything in Burgundy. In years like 1999, 2002, 2005, 2010, 2015, and 2019, even lesser producers can make extremely memorable wines because the raw material is so strong. These are the very best vintages to take chances. Perhaps you try a Burgundy from a vineyard with which you're not familiar, or a producer that you haven't heard of previously. This will maximize your chances of finding a Burgundy that punches well above its price point. But as you move down the Burgundy quality hierarchy, vintage becomes more important, and it becomes absolutely critical when you're talking about producers that aren't operating at the highest level. A weak vintage in Burgundy can expose a number of evils. It can exaggerate the quality differences between parcels, and it can absolutely punish mediocre farming. Even in a fragmented Grand Cru vineyard like Corton or Clos de Vougeot, it can exaggerate the quality differences between top producers and mediocre ones to the point where it's hard to tell that the wines from these producers are from the same appellation. Of course, it's also worth noting that vintage also interacts with vine age. So it's also important to consider that old vines can sometimes withstand challenging vintages better than young ones. Certainly in the case of extreme heat, old vines can definitely better withstand the heat as the roots can go down deeper and they can still produce concentrated high-quality fruit, notwithstanding the heat challenges. Nevertheless, when I'm approaching Burgundy, a rule that I typically keep in mind is that the lesser the site and the weaker the producer, the more that the vintage matters. With that by way of background, it's time for me to reveal some of the principles that I use when I'm making my own decisions regarding purchasing Burgundy. And the first of which is that classification is not dispositive. not all Grand Crus are created equal. You could have situations where a Premier Cru is better than a Grand Cru. Likewise, there's plenty of village-level Burgundy that can outshine some Premier Crus. Number 2, vintage variation is significant. Strong vintages elevate everything. Weak vintages expose and exaggerate differences and weaknesses. If you're going to take a flyer on a wine, do so in a strong vintage, but by the same token, you could have some sites that are so consistent and so elite that you don't want to pass up the opportunity to taste it just because it comes from a challenging vintage. Number 3, parcel variations vary more than people think. Even within the same climat, there could be substantial variations in sun exposure, drainage, and conditions. Micro-terroir is real. Number 4, while it's important to trust the producer, producers' quality levels can change and evolve over time. So it's important to look behind the producer's name and consider the quality level at the time of the vintage for the wine that you're thinking about buying, and not just rely exclusively on the label, the history, or the hype. Number 5, in Burgundy, there are very few shortcuts, and those that do exist often cost a small fortune. Everything else requires careful, case-by-case consideration of the site, the producer, the vintage, and more. To learn more about legendary Burgundy producer DRC, please be sure to watch this video that's linked above.